Welcome. If you're reading this, it's not by accident, and you already know that. You're not here for cliches, small talk, or surface-level comfort. You're here because something in you knows you're different. And maybe the world couldn't name it. Maybe you even doubted it yourself. But deep down, you've always felt it. The pull, the pressure, the power. You're not just someone trying to find their way. You're someone built to shift the atmosphere. And no, it's not always been easy carrying that kind of presence. Being the one who walks in and suddenly people start adjusting their energy. You've been misunderstood, underestimated, and even feared. Not because you're wrong, but because you're real. This isn't for everyone. This is for the ones who were never meant to blend in. The ones whose presence brings clarity, whose silence speaks louder than noise, whose love transforms instead of entertains. You're not here to please. You're here to awaken. So let this be your reminder. You're not too much. You're not intimidating. You're exactly what this world has been starving for. The ones who get it will rise with you. The ones who don't, they were never meant to sit at your table. You're not just walking through life. You're leaving a mark. You're not just chosen. You're anointed. Let's talk about what that really means. Let's strip off the fear, the doubt, the guilt, and step into the power you were always meant to carry. This is your moment. Let's go. Looking for purpose and peace? Hit subscribe and start the journey. There are people who don't simply cross paths with others. They upend internal landscapes without lifting a finger. They don't charm, perform, or pursue. Yet their presence feels like stepping into an unfamiliar mirror. Not because they impose, but because something in their steadiness rattles what's been unspoken for years. It's not attraction in the usual sense. It's a jolt to the nervous system, a quiet confrontation wrapped in eye contact or silence. Days pass, and the echo of that moment still lingers, not because of what was said, but because something long forgotten stirred. What unsettles isn't what they offer, but what they reflect. An undisturbed sense of self that makes avoidance impossible. They don't invite chaos, they illuminate it. While most connections offer distraction, this one demands introspection. And that's the paradox. People ache for something deep, yet recoil when faced with its cost. To be near them isn't to bask in warmth, but to feel heat on the fractures never acknowledged. They don't arrive with healing hands, but they hold up an invisible blueprint of what's missing. And suddenly, the space people called enough begins to feel suffocating. Their energy acts like a silent alarm in someone else's internal world. It's not loud, but it's persistent, asking questions, opening doors, drawing curtains back on rooms kept dark. And the truth is, most don't flee because of disinterest. If your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $50 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of His sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. They leave because staying would mean unlearning everything comfortable. What feels like infatuation is actually recognition of what's possible, of what's been avoided. They don't complete others. They awaken what's incomplete. They're not a fleeting feeling. They are a turning point most aren't yet brave enough to face. Some connections don't wait for logic to catch up. They arrive already understood in the marrow. Long before questions take shape or advice is sought, an unspoken familiarity settles in. It's not about shared history or surface attraction. It's a resonance that bypasses language entirely. The presence alone feels like a compass suddenly pointing home, though the destination was never consciously known. That's why their reactions are clumsy, their composure frays, and their emotions spike without cause. Something essential inside them already identified what their conscious mind struggles to name. That lingering stare, the sudden silence, the laugh that escapes too quickly. All of it rooted in a recognition that has no explanation. You didn't appear like someone new. It felt more like the return of something they've spent years forgetting how to remember. The impact wasn't made with charm or performance, but with a stillness that cracked open something guarded. It's the kind of recognition that doesn't announce itself with words, but instead rearranges internal coordinates. What unnerves them isn't the interaction. It's the undeniable knowing that arrived without warning. This is why they can't detach, even in the absence of logic. Thoughts circle back, images resurface in dreams, and questions multiply with no answers. Their internal compass didn't just spin. It locked onto a frequency they weren't prepared to tune into. It's not infatuation. It's not curiosity. It's the tremble of something real, unexpected, and unfiltered. But here's the disruption. Most people are taught to rely on frameworks, definitions, and predictable metrics. And when something slips through those filters and still leaves a mark, it throws them. Make your impact eternal. Join now and be a light in someone's darkness. They can't describe why they feel it, only that they do. And that unknown makes them uncomfortable, because people fear what they can't label. They're left watching from the outskirts of their own emotions, wondering what it was that hit different. But it wasn't new. It was ancient, familiar, and deeply unsettling, because their soul noticed before they had time to decide whether it should. There are individuals who can't be approached lightly because their presence transforms. Engaging with them doesn't feel like a moment. It feels like a turning point. They don't speak in rehearsed lines or dance around pleasantries. Their words carve through noise. Their silence amplifies everything avoided. Interactions with them don't dissolve into forgettable fragments. They sink in and stay. Their conversations don't entertain. They illuminate, even when unintended. Where others rely on performance and pretense, this kind of presence disarms effortlessly. Lies feel out of place in their atmosphere. Masks become suffocating, not through judgment, but because truth naturally expands in their vicinity. Something in the way they listen makes excuses fall apart, and even if they remain silent, it's as if their attention alone lights up corners others would rather keep in shadow. People find themselves replaying the most ordinary exchanges with them, not because of drama or intensity, but because the insights offered land in places long neglected. The way they speak unveils contradictions people weren't ready to confront. Even kindness from them doesn't soften the weight of that clarity. It sharpens it. They expose, unintentionally, just how much pretending others have been doing. There's no such thing as just talking when it comes to them. Each word, each glance, holds up a mirror. Without trying, they become a catalyst for inner inventory. Not because they aim to fix or change others, but because they don't shrink themselves to make anyone comfortable. That kind of integrity forces people to either evolve or exit. Being near them means stepping out of illusion. It's not safe for the part of you still clinging to avoidance. That's why casual isn't an option. They represent a threshold. And once crossed, nothing internal stays arranged the same. If your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $50 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of His sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. Some people dissolve every disguise without trying, and that's the effect you have. Pretending feels impossible in your space, not because you accuse or expose with words, but because your presence quietly dismantles everything false. Confidence borrowed from ego suddenly feels hollow. Rehearsed charm falls flat, and every carefully built facade trembles under the weight of your unspoken truth. You don't play into the characters they've created. You stare straight through them, not to intimidate, but because you only respond to what's real. Around you, performances crumble. They try to project strength, but you sense the restlessness hiding in their posture. They attempt to appear unbothered, but the tension behind their silence speaks louder than their smiles. Your energy refuses to indulge illusions, and that refusal feels like a challenge they never expected. You don't need to correct them or demand anything. Your quiet certainty already reminds them of what authenticity looks like. That, more than anything, makes shallow games impossible. When people attempt to spin stories, their words collapse midair. They stumble, hesitate, rethink. It's not fear of judgment. It's the discomfort of being seen without the armor they've always relied on. Pretending feels suffocating in your company, not because you confront them, but because you don't look away. Your presence insists on honesty without ever asking for it out loud, and that silent request is more powerful than any spoken demand. To love someone like you requires unveiling every false layer. You don't reward half-truths or chase emotional fog. You invite people to meet themselves fully, and that kind of love feels foreign, even threatening, to those who cling to their masks. It's not you they resist, it's the cost of dropping everything fake. Being close to you means exchanging comfort for clarity, safety for depth, illusion for growth. And while their soul longs for that, their ego fights it, because nothing counterfeit can survive where you stand. There are people who embody what others think they want, only to reveal that realness comes with responsibility, and you are that revelation. At first glance, you look like the answer to silent hopes, the presence that carries warmth, depth, and unwavering strength. But what they expected was someone gentle enough to keep their world unchanged, someone who would fit into their comfort zones without asking questions. You are not that. You don't show up to soothe stagnation. You arrive to wake what's been asleep. Make your impact eternal. Join now and be a light in someone's darkness. You disrupt in the way truth always does. You don't stay quiet to avoid tension, nor do you dilute yourself to keep people from feeling challenged. You don't wait for permission to call life what it is. You see what's broken and refuse to normalize it. The same person who once called you perfect now finds you overwhelming, not because you've shifted, but because you turned out to be the very depth they weren't ready to face. They prayed for something real, but never imagined it would strip away their comfort to give them clarity. You are untamed energy in a world built on muted emotions. You don't settle for shallow. You don't pretend you don't feel, and you don't allow the people around you to stay asleep while claiming they want more. Most say they want transformation until they meet someone who won't let them run from it. That's when they retreat. Not because you're wrong for them, but because you're exactly what their spirit asked for before they were ready to follow through. You never existed to be easy. You are the embodiment of what they claimed they wanted when they were most desperate for change. But change is never gentle. You carry the kind of fire that doesn't just light a path. It burns away the unnecessary. And while they might see that as too much, it's only because they didn't realize that real love, real truth, and real growth are never meant to be passive. You are not a quiet answer. You are a call to awaken, and that call terrifies anyone who still wants to stay asleep. Some presences can't be caged, only honored from a distance, and that's the energy you carry. Not designed for possession, not meant to be kept under control. You rattle those who rely on dominance to feel valuable. They're used to people bending, needing, proving, but you do none of that. You don't chase what doesn't recognize you, and you don't shrink to be palatable. That refusal to be contained unsettles those who confuse love with leverage. You move like someone who's earned their peace. Not loud, not seeking approval, just rooted. You've seen manipulation in its subtleties and its extremes, and now, anything that feels like a trick has no pull. When someone tries to unsettle you with ambiguity or bait you into chaos, you don't react. You remove yourself, and that calm refusal to play their game exposes the truth they've been hiding behind tactics. They realize quickly, you're not a puppet, you're a presence. In a room, you don't have to speak to shift the atmosphere. Your stillness disrupts systems. Your boundaries challenge their expectations. Control no longer works when met with someone who answers only to alignment. And that shakes something in people who are used to holding power by withholding love. They sense it. Misusing your access won't end with indifference. It will end with loss, not just of a person, but of the stability and synchronicity you brought. Because your presence never arrives empty. It comes layered with protection, clarity, and flow. Once gone, it's not just you they miss. It's everything that once felt possible while you were near. They may not understand what they had until silence replaces your space. But deep down they know. You were never something to conquer or contain. You were a turning point they tried to control. And life won't stop echoing that lesson until they finally understand. Some connections exist to be honored, not owned. To be close to you means to face the parts of oneself that were never meant to stay. Love in your realm isn't a refuge for dysfunction. It's a catalyst for unlearning it. You don't just offer connection. You reflect possibility. But that reflection shines into spaces most people have kept untouched. Being loved by you isn't a soft distraction. It's a reckoning. You don't fit comfortably into a life built on cycles of pain and denial. You interrupt those patterns by existing fully, and that alone begins unraveling what they thought they needed. You're not the kind to soften your light, to make others feel okay in their shadow. You expect effort, truth, and emotional maturity. Not perfection, but presence. You don't hold space for half-heartedness. Those still entangled in toxic familiarity, addicted to the chaos they once called love, will struggle beside you. Not because you ask for too much, but because you expose how little they've been asking of themselves. Being around you requires release of outdated roles, of self-deceptions, of the false sense of safety found in struggle. And that release feels threatening to someone who's identified with survival more than growth. They may want you, but the version of themselves that craves drama can't exist in the same space as your clarity. It's not rejection, it's misalignment. They realize this, even if they don't admit it. Your energy doesn't leave room for confusion to linger. What most people don't see is that you weren't sent to validate what's broken. You were meant to challenge it. You're not here to comfort dysfunction. You're here to end it. And for someone who thought love meant being accepted as they are, even when they're not evolving, that kind of presence feels more like a wake-up call than a home. But you weren't built to be easy. You were built to be real. And that kind of love requires not just affection, but accountability. There are people who unknowingly step into your space only to be faced with the parts of themselves they've spent years avoiding. Not because you demand it, but because something about your presence acts like a spotlight in places they've kept dim. You don't approach love like a script they're familiar with. You bring an entirely different rhythm, one that doesn't reward self-deception or feed into illusions. What you offer doesn't flatter the ego, it confronts it. And for those who've built a life around hiding from themselves, that confrontation feels threatening. They don't realize at first what's happening. The shift is quiet. They start noticing discomfort in their choices, feel restless in habits that once brought comfort, become uneasy around dynamics they used to navigate blindly. Not because you said anything, but because being near you silences the noise they've used as distraction. You don't accuse. You don't correct. You simply exist in a way that turns their own gaze inward. And that reflection is not something everyone is ready for. It's not chaos they fear, it's stillness. Because stillness reveals patterns. It shows the attachments that drain, the excuses that trap, the belief systems that coddle stagnancy. You don't force change. You make it impossible to ignore. The way you love doesn't come from lack, fear, or guilt. It comes from alignment. And alignment, to someone rooted in distortion, feels like an earthquake. But it's not destruction, it's exposure. And exposure is only terrifying to those unwilling to face it. Your kind of care doesn't soothe dysfunction, it dissolves it. And that can feel like an attack when someone's identity is built on dysfunction being normal. They sense they'll need to rebuild themselves to stand beside you. That scares them more than losing you, because it means letting go of everything that's been safe but harmful. And so they love you and fear you at once, because something in them recognizes this isn't just a connection, it's a mirror. And not everyone's ready to look. If your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $50 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of His sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. Some are drawn to your presence, like wanderers to warmth, mistaking what they admire for something easily held. They trace the outline of your energy, trying to bottle it, borrow it, bask in it. But what they feel is only the afterglow of your becoming. The stillness you carry, the unwavering strength, the grace in your silence. It's all been earned through breaking, through rebuilding, through walking away from comfort in pursuit of something deeper. But that part they overlook. They want your energy as if it arrived without cost. They want the beauty without the ashes, the peace without the unraveling. They see what you are now and believe proximity alone can grant them the same, never considering that what they're drawn to was shaped in solitude, loss, and inner fire. They skip over the wilderness that refined you and try to imitate what they don't understand. But this version of you can't be duplicated. It was born from choosing integrity over ease, from choosing healing when hiding would have been simpler. So they hover, hoping to absorb through osmosis what can only be cultivated through deep transformation. They mimic your language, but avoid your silence. They echo your strength, but flee from their own shadows. They crave what you've become, but resist the path it takes to get there. And that's where the distance forms. Not because you push them away, but because your evolution draws a line they must cross themselves. What they fail to see is that your energy is a byproduct of your choices. It's not charm, it's commitment. It's not magnetism, it's mastery over your own storms. And unless they're willing to dismantle the parts of themselves built in fear, they'll keep circling what they can't hold. Because your life isn't an aesthetic, it's a testament. And no one inherits that simply by standing close. They must be willing to become. And most aren't. So they admire, then retreat, captivated by the glow, but unprepared for the transformation that fuels it. Make your impact eternal. Join now and be a light in someone's darkness. Some people evoke a shift without speaking, and your presence does just that. You don't walk into a room looking for control or attention, yet things change when you arrive, not through intimidation or volume, but through a quiet gravity that makes others pause. Without trying, you awaken a strange awareness in those around you, as if they suddenly remember there's more expected of them, more within them, more they've been avoiding. They fidget. They overcompensate. They rehearse their words, second-guess their instincts. They don't fear you in a surface-level way. They fear what you stir beneath the mask. It's not about judgment. It's the realization that pretending won't hold up in your atmosphere. You bring no accusations, yet their own conscience begins to speak louder. And that voice, one they've silenced for years, starts to rise again just by being near you. You don't demand truth, yet it shows up in your space like it's been waiting for permission. Your presence reminds people of how far they've strayed from who they could be. And that doesn't feel like punishment, it feels like awakening. The weight of their own avoidance starts pressing in, not through confrontation, but through contrast. What you are reflects what they've forgotten how to become. There's something about you that makes standing still feel like stagnation, not because you push, but because you don't settle. And that subtle energy makes those living small feel the boundaries of their own box. They know that to step closer to you means shedding what no longer fits. You don't ask them to change, but their own soul begins whispering that they must. And that whisper grows louder the longer they remain in your field. That's why your name lives in their thoughts longer than they admit. That's why proximity feels like pressure and inspiration at once. You don't bring punishment. You bring potential. But potential demands the end of pretense. And for many, the scariest truth is realizing they're not yet willing to let go of the very things holding them back. Some people aren't just different. They're living reminders of a life others abandoned. You are one of them. When people cross your path, they don't just encounter uniqueness. They come face to face with what they sacrificed to fit in. You trigger memory of a self that once burned with clarity, before settling for compromise. You're not a novelty. You're a nudge, one that calls them back to what they were before fear taught them to dim. You don't carry curated perfection. You carry alignment. While others craft personas, you simply remain whole. That wholeness doesn't need approval. And it's that unapologetic authenticity that unsettles people who've spent years performing for acceptance. You don't flaunt it. You don't even try. But your existence speaks, louder than most declarations ever could. Without preaching, without correction, you hold up an invisible reflection, and that reflection is hard to ignore. Make your impact eternal. Join now and be a light in someone's darkness. They see in you the choices they didn't make, the dreams they shelved, the version of themselves they once believed in but abandoned. And that's not easy to face. You don't shame them. You awaken them. You walk in truth, and that truth becomes a mirror they weren't looking for. Every time they encounter you, they remember the cost of conformity. You didn't become this by accident. You made choices others avoided. You stood tall when it was easier to fold. You pursued meaning when applause would have been simpler to chase. That's why your presence carries weight. You didn't climb by stepping on others. You rose by refusing to lie to yourself. And now, simply by being, you challenge everyone around you to do the same. So when they seem uneasy, withdrawn, or reactive, it's not rejection. It's recognition. A recognition that your life calls them back to something real. And real is terrifying for those who've made a home in artifice. You don't just show them who you are. You remind them of who they used to be. And that ache is what truth sounds like when it knocks on a door that's been locked for too long.